And I could tell you that the Catholic schools did not have the tools that it took, evidently, to deal with, diagnose, manage, help anyone with any learning differences. Hey, welcome to Asking Me Too, a channel for people with ASD or people who think they may have ASD. So tune in, subscribe. You'll get a notification for every new video we upload. Try to do a lot of shorts, and then we do some longer videos periodically that are more educational. Today, we're going to talk about school as a young boy. So, as most of you know, I was diagnosed recently with ASD. And so one of the things that happened to me is during the COVID crisis, I was working from home, and the company that I was working for had laid me off. And I had a lot of time to write resumes and come up, do some soul searching, and do a lot of things. And one of the things that I noticed when I was writing my resume or doing security clearance, if you've ever done security clearance information, they go back many, 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 many years. And so I just put together a chronological of my life. And when I looked at it, it was glaringly obvious that I have an issue. Multiple relationships, poor relationships, in multiple relationships that all ended very poorly, and all the same way. Troubled relationships with my family or no relationship with my family, and I have 7 brothers and sisters. Um, the signs were just obvious and conspicuous to me, and then I started thinking about school, and I started thinking about how school was for me as a child. Now, I grew up in Iowa, and I grew up in a town called Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and it had, I don't know, it had 100,000 people or something like that. It wasn't a small town. It had there was a good population of people, enough to give you kind of an urban feeling. And I went to a Catholic school for the grades 1 through 4. And I could tell you that the Catholic schools did not have the tools that it took, evidently, to deal with, diagnose, manage, help anyone with any learning differences. As a matter of fact, if you were left-handed, they would beat that out of you, and you would leave school writing right-handed. And I'm not kidding about that. So I didn't do well in the Catholic school because there were no resources, and I was not identified as autistic because I could mask so well. I don't know if I could mask well back then or not. I learned to mask. When you run into so many buzzsaws, you learn to mask. So I would say the discipline problems. I didn't understand the material. We would do things, and then they'd have a test, and I would be like, I have no idea, none. I don't know what you're talking about. I literally was just a floating human being being babysat for 4 years in that Catholic school and got zero education. And they just kept passing me along because my parents kept writing the checks until finally I got to the 4th grade, and things got so bad for me, so bad for me. I was hated by everyone. I was a troubled child. I was a bully. Well, no, I take that back. I was never a bully. I was always the one that would get upset quickest when he was picked on. I wasn't a bully. I was very emotional and angry. And one day, it was during the winter time, and they didn't have a gymnasium, but they had a big hall that they used for like bingo and dances and wrestling and indoor sports and stuff like that. But it didn't have high ceilings for basketball. It was just a lower ceiling, big hall. And it was called Becker Hall. And during the winter, when we couldn't go outside on the playground for recess or gym class, they would have us in Becker Hall. Well, we had this jump roping lesson plan, if you will, that included the planets, and the goal was to do tricks with the jump rope so that you could get to the next planet. And everyone's name was up on the wall. Everyone's name was up on the wall and what planet they were on. So now you have, now you have public shaming if you can't get, certain things done. Well, I was very uncoordinated. I couldn't do anything with the jump rope. Nothing. I had a hard time just jumping rope. I mean, I hadn't developed yet, and but I didn't know how to say anything, and they certainly didn't know how to recognize it. So and you might want to mute this video right now. I'm going to speak in code um, because this isn't funny. I did it to get attention, and I did it to stop me from having to do what I was being forced to do, which was humiliating and embarrassing for me. But I took the jump rope and I went over to the coat racks and I brought a chair over and put myself there in hopes that a teacher would come over and see that and rescue me and listen to me when I tell them that I'm not going to do this jump rope thing. Well, evidently they didn't take too kindly to that maneuver, and I was kicked out of the Catholic school in the 4th grade. So off to the public school I went. One problem with that, my house, the public school was between my house and the Catholic school. So I walked through the public school playground all the time when they had recess. And because I didn't know how to make friends and I didn't know what friends were, and a lot of things that I haven't even figured out why I did what I did, but I would be really mean to the boys out on that playground. And it probably came from jealousy or something like that. But I would be really mean to them. So now I'm going to go to a school where all those boys are at. And I could tell you, those boys and I are still friends to this day. So school was very difficult for me. We had the Iowa tests of basic skills. Iowa tests of basic skills was a national test that they use, a standardized test to determine how well they were teaching and how well it was being retained, I guess. Maybe someone could comment on here more about what those are for. But we had to take those all the time, and it seems like, and I could never take those. And so literally that was a video game for me where I would just play mark the dots. And I must have been awfully lucky because I never got, either they ignored my low scores or I was lucky enough to get some right answers, but I certainly didn't perform on those tests. And so that's a story I wanted to tell you, that during my entire school career, and then moving on to public school, junior high, and high school, the problems continued, but the tolerance for the problems went away. And so there was a counselor that I was called in to see in junior high school, where they had a little, in the public school system, where they had more resources. And I can remember that counselor. And the only thing I can remember from that counselor, and there was probably 4 or 5 of us that got pulled into that, it was about an hour a day for a week. I think it was a week. It might have been a couple weeks. I don't know. Sorry about my dog. My dog's drinking water and walking around. Drinking water and walking around. But that counselor taught me to look people in the eye. And that's something that I can't do. I don't like to have eye contact. I can look at you if you're not looking at me, but if you look at me, I don't like to have eye contact. It's a very difficult thing for me. And that person taught me that it's important to look people in the eye. And so there began the building of my mask. I started to realize that there are things out there that I'm not seeing or I'm not doing. And so I started to copy people, and I started to listen to things like this guy telling me, I'm sure he was a psychologist, and I'm sure I was identified as somebody special. And I learned from him to look people in the eye, and that was important, and that has helped me in my entire life, and that helped me build my mask. And to be honest with you, that was the beginning of me understanding, I think unconsciously, that I could build a mask. And my mask took me all the way through high school, barely passed. The classes that I did well in were speech class, because we were able to do presentations on a stage, and I like to act and do presentations and stuff like that. But my friends were into sports, and so I went the sports route. Ran track every year of my life from grade school up through high school, and I played basketball my whole life. Um, and I have stories about that too. Um, so difficulties learning plays, difficulties understanding what the concepts of plays were, and how that put me behind in basketball. But um, all in all, I'm happy today that this has been discovered, and that I have the opportunity to go back and kind of work through these situations that I have always felt identify me as a really defective, bad person. Always. I have always felt that way. I have always felt that I am a defective, bad person. Yet I know in my heart, I'm not. I'm the most caring, giving, and loving person that anyone would want me to be. But based on my mirrors, the responses that I get from society, I'm a horrible, rotten person. And so I'm discovering now that I might not be. And there might be an answer, and some facts and some more analysis that needs to be done in my life, to look and see how this new development, this new diagnosis will impact me going forward.